truth of that is I do have a degree from ATU with emergency management, but I'm now in the music industry. Just to go back a little bit, I'm from Ozark. She told you my stepdad was the county judge of Franklin County, and probably the first disaster I remember, I was in junior high, and we had a tornado hit my neighborhood, or not my neighborhood, but Ozark, and I had a good friend lose a house, and I remember going out and helping like clean up and try to find things like that. And shortly after that, we had a flood, and I went out with Fred Mullins, who is still our current OEM director, and pulling tree limbs out of culverts just so the water could flow through. And basically, we were helping people. And I told Fred at a young age in my teens, I said, man, I could do this for a living. He said, well, you might not make a living doing it, but it's definitely a good thing to do for a living, helping people. And so I had that, along with growing up, and in high school I was a volunteer firefighter and was around, any kind of disaster response we did. I knew nothing about the program at the time. I came to Tech to play football, and my second year here, I tore my knee up pretty good and had some surgery, and was walking around some recruits, and there was an open house over here where, I don't know if the library is still over here. Well, no, the library's over there, but the bookstore used to be over here. And they had an open house, and I had a guy come up to me and handed me a packet, and he said, have you heard about the EAM degree? And I said, nope, I'm an engineering major, but thank you. And so I walked around all day on crutches and threw it in the apartment and checked it out later, and I thought, man, this is kind of what Fred does. I didn't realize there was a degree, and I went home and told my family about it, and then Joe said, well, you need to know Dr. Rollins. And so that's kind of how I got directed to the program, and my second year here, I switched majors and started studying that. And y'all have heard so much about the staff and the former staff and the classes, so I won't go into boring you with any more of my experiences there. But it was such a fun thing not knowing what in the hell I was going to do with my degree when I got out of Arkansas Tech, because that's kind of how I came into college. My mom, I drove her nuts. I didn't know what I wanted to major in. Find something you're passionate about, and I guarantee you there's an emergency management aspect of that job that you can do. If you want to have the desk job, you can do that. If you want to be in the field, if you want to travel, like Annette said earlier, there's all sorts of opportunities. So find what it is that you're passionate about and use this degree program to bring your value to that company, to that agency, to that business. I did my internship at Adam, and for the longest time I thought, who's Adam and why would I want to work for him? And then I found out it was the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management. So I met a gentleman named Bud Harper that Joe introduced me to, and when I got the internship, he said, well, we're excited to have you. What job is it here at Adam that you're interested in? And I said, well, honestly, Bud, you're in charge, aren't you? He goes, well, yeah, I was appointed by the governor, so you might have to meet the governor and get to be friends with him first. I'm like, all right, well, I can learn a lot between now and then. And I started out, much like Scott did, in the underground basement area doing the communications, the 24-hour ops call center, and worked there for a few years, and then got a promotion up to the Office of Domestic Preparedness and got to learn a lot about hazmat and decon, and dealt with many millions of dollars of money going out to law enforcement, firefighters, response teams in the counties, and really enjoyed allowing them the equipment and the needs necessary to help people. Ended up becoming a law enforcement coordinator. And to back up, when I was in my senior year here at Arkansas Tech, I worked with Charlie Smith, who Mr. Gilkey mentioned earlier over in Yale County. He was the OEM director, and I got to work with him. And he put me through, he said, you need to go through this part-time 2 course. One of my favorite courses I took was law enforcement and emergency management here, and learned about the Nile River Police, the first official police force. And I thought, man, if there's a course that I can learn more about law enforcement, I want to do that. So I went through this course. It took several months, and it ended up getting deputized by Sheriff Gilkey, because I didn't realize this was a course that kind of got folks ready to become law enforcement officers, which I thought would have been interesting, but not necessarily the career path I wanted to take. But looking back on how some things will happen in your life, and you're not really sure why they'll happen, and then later in life it'll kind of be revealed to you why you got to go through those things. And so for about 3.5 years I worked for Adam, and loved every bit of it. And then Katrina hit, and for about 9 months we dealt with all of the shelters that we had. Ray Brigler went down to New Orleans. He was the central area coordinator, and I filled in for him while he was gone. We had about 17 shelters that we got to work with. One of them had about 350 folks in it. from New Orleans, and I thought, man, all these folks need help. I hope I eventually get to go down, to New Orleans and be a part of this, Katrina, at the time the biggest disaster that we'd ever seen. And I did. Not too long, kind of like Annette, I was sitting next to someone who worked there, and they said, man, we're fixing to hire a bunch of reservists. If it's something you're interested in doing, then you should come down there and do that. Was Turner Dorm. My freshman year, I took a pawn shop guitar and learned a few chords watching CMT. And that's kind of how my musical journey started. It was a hobby. And to fast forward, in 2007, I was in Portland, Maine, working on the flood. And finally, after about 4 or 5 weeks of working 7 days a week, we had a day off. So I went to a little bar there in Portland, Maine. I met a guy that played a gig every Tuesday night, and we became friends. And a few weeks later, he got me on stage to perform. And I did, and I was horrible. So bad, like really bad. Dropped my pick 3 times during the first song. So I was like, yeah, there's the end of my performing career. I went back that night and I thought, man, I want to write a better song. So I Googled songwriting, and I found a company called the Nashville Songwriters Association. I joined online, sent some songs for evaluation, and they thought, man, you're pretty creative. You should come to Nashville and do this thing called Song Camp. And so I visited Nashville, Tennessee, and thought, man, I've always loved country music, but I never thought I'd ever visit Nashville, and much less learn about songwriting. And like I said, all that because I met a guy while I was working on a disaster in Portland, Maine. In 2012, I had my first major song cut by a guy named Dylan Scott on Curb Records. 2015, I had a song recorded by a girl named Kelsey Ballerini. Does anybody know a girl named Kelsey Ballerini? And he goes, if you're gonna love me like you mean it. And so we wrote that together with a few of our friends. It became my first #1 song as a songwriter. And last year, I signed a record deal with Toby Keith, and me and his daughter Crystal had a song on the radio this past year. And now next year, I'll get to release my first solo single as a country music artist. So if you'd have told me that first day over here in Turner when I picked up that little guitar and strummed a few chords and was thinking about football and school and all that I would go through a program that would take me through working for local, state, federal, dealing with the private sector and getting to see and do the things that I got to do, and then lead back to music becoming such a huge part of my life, I'd probably laughed you out the room. So if you have something inside you that you think you want to do with this degree and you don't know how to do it, just like someone that said, just do it.